Hi, everybody. It's Thursday, February 20th, and you're here at the OSPO working group meeting. I'm Elizabeth. I'm facilitating today. Gary and Dawn are both out. Apologies for the voice, but it is what it is. So we'll, we'll just get going. I'm going to share. There we go. If you haven't added your name to the agenda, that would be great. If you feel like doing that, you don't have to. And let us know what your favorite spring flower is. Oh, I love all these. Y'all know, I don't know if you know, but I'm a nature photographer on the side. So like that's my jam. I love taking pictures of flowers. I love all these hellebores are great. Okay, let's go ahead and start just down the agenda. Thanks to Elizabeth. You're welcome. No problem at all. Okay, this is I don't know how this group feels about recording these meetings, or if we want to change them to Chatham House rules. Totally happy to do that, whatever works for the group. So I'll let y'all talk about it.
I'm fine with whatever people need. I'm not presenting, so I feel like whoever's got things to talk about, they got more sway on this one.
We're good to record.
Anybody else have any opinions on this? General feeling is that recording is okay. I guess we can also wait till Gary and Don are back to make that final decision, because I'm not sure where this came up. Maybe someone did have a problem, so yeah. But everybody here is okay with me recording today, so we'll just keep recording. All right, sounds good. Look at us, we're just blowing through this agenda. We're so productive. Yeah, so if you were not at the funding impact measurement working group, we went off to a really good start. Was anybody there who is here right now that wants to just give their general thoughts about it? I was there in spirit, but I was also doing other things, full disclosure, full confession. So I don't have detailed thoughts on it. It was very well attended, though. It was a super interesting group of folks, all coming at this idea from different contexts, different backgrounds. So that was super interesting, I thought. You can also check out the minutes from that group is over here somewhere under funding, under F, there it is, right now, by below us. And then we did record and post the meeting. So if you do want to watch it, feel free to do that. You can speed it up. That's what I do, like 2 times. The next meeting is February 26th. So if you want to join, you can do that here. And there is a calendar. You can subscribe to the calendar. This will just add just this event to your calendar if you do that up here. So just keep that in mind. It's just for this event. But yeah, I think it's super interesting. Everybody cares about this topic. So yeah, if it's something that you also care about, I highly recommend joining that group. Any other final thoughts before I move on? Okay, let's go on to CHAOSScon, FOSDEM, State of OpenCon, that whole series of events. Would love to hear if people were there, if you have any feedback or saw anything cool, or any observations that you had, any patterns you saw in popular talks, or what was kind of like on everybody's mind. If you were there, I'd love to hear what you're thinking.
Also, only there in spirit.
I see Georg is on here. Georg, do you want to talk about anything that you saw? I've sadly missed your talk with Kevin, but we would love to hear about that.
Yeah, I'm happy to share the
coming to Brussels was again a fantastic experience. So many people, so many chaotics at CHAOSScon. When Daniel asked during the keynote how many were there for their first CHAOSScon, I think 70% of attendees raised their hand. So we have a lot of interest from people who are interested in the work that we're doing, and they're getting additional exposure and joining our events. The CHAOSScon was really well structured this time. I really enjoyed especially the afternoon. So the morning we had, for those who are familiar with CHAOSScon, we had talks, and then in the afternoon we went for very interactive format where we had unconference sessions where any topics that came up, and I'm not sure which topics actually were discussed there because I was in the software group or room. And this time, one of the really awesome things is we brought Augur and Grimoire Lab developers, maintainers, and users into one room, and we had some knowledge sharing going on, sharing what we're currently working on in the different projects, what are the challenges we're facing. There's a lot of overlap, as you might expect, with solving the hard problem of getting the data and making it useful. So that was really good bringing everyone together. And then we had a fantastic, just amazing social afterwards where we, I think we closed the bar in the end because we stayed way longer than we had scheduled for. So the CHAOSScon was a really great experience. And anyone who has time to go in the future, I think the next one we might be organizing at the Open Source Summit North America in Denver in June, and then FOSDEM for sure again next year. Always great. With regards to FOSDEM, I went to a few chaotics, talks of chaotics, like the panel that Don had. Kate had a great talk about Zephyr and best practices for growing an open source project that is very focused on safety and security. The talks that I gave, one was in the SBOM dev room on combining project health with SBOM. So basically taking the next step. I see a lot of companies are working on creating their SBOMs right now and discovering what open source they have in their technology stacks. And so advocating to take the next step, applying what we've learned in CHAOSS, using the tools we have to understand the health of the open source projects as the third pillar. You know, companies are looking at license compliance, they're looking at the security vulnerabilities, and then project health as a more forward-thinking analysis to engage with projects strategically and manage that relationship strategically. So that was my talk in the SBOM dev room. And then I had a talk with Kevin and Johan on a research project we did where we asked maintainers what support they need, because funding is not always what they actually need. They need a lot of other support too. And so we created and presented in the talk ways that we can think about this. And we kicked off the day, so I think the funding dev room people really wanted to have that balanced perspective of how we support maintainers and ensure the long-term sustainability of open source projects. So that's what I can share on this trip. I did not go to State of OpenCon because I had a family vacation. I went to Colorado for some skiing. It was good too.
Thank you, Georg. Thank you very much for that summary. Yeah, CHAOSScon was amazing. We only broke one glass, so there was that. It's the only venue that has like the tile floor and very narrow tables, and they give like glasses to all of us. So last year I think we ended up breaking like 5, but we only broke 1 this year. So yay, it's progress. Yeah, it was great. And I just want to mention, if anybody wants to see the slides from CHAOSScon, they're all well, they're all linked from the website, but they're also all in the CHAOSScon channel on our Slack. So if you're not in there and you want to like live vicariously through others, you can join that channel and get all the slides from those presentations. I think there was even pictures of our unconference topics and things. So yeah, feel free to join that if you're not in there already. And State of OpenCon is always a fantastic conference as well. I didn't see any talks, unfortunately. I was at the chaos table, but it's a really interesting mix of folks. There's politicians there, companies, and then of course your standard open source folks. So it's a really interesting mix. Highly recommend if you happen to be in London during that time, just check it out. It's interesting. Okay, any final thoughts or questions, comments, anything from that whole European trip? I brought home more than swag, as you could tell. This, I think, came from that. So, yeah, thank you, Europe. The gift that keeps on giving. Excuse me, I'm so sorry. Okay, let's move on. I'm not sure who, I'm assuming, Remy, you want to talk about this, but I don't want to assume anything, so.
Yep, that's us. So if we got time and folks are interested, we shipped a few new tools over the last month or so that we wanted to share with the OSPO working group here at CHAOSS. Is it okay if we take over screen share?
Definitely okay with me.
All right. Sachin, you're up. And while Sachin is getting the screen share up, there's a lot of links in the agenda. All of the links are going to go through in that order as we talk about this stuff. So they are there. You can follow along at home. But it starts off with the story of code.gov. Code.gov was created in 2016. It was M1621, the federal open source code policy, was released. And there was a inventory metadata standard that came along with it. So in the next tab, you can see there's guidance for agencies about how they should add metadata to their repositories. And if you scroll down a little bit farther, Sachin, you can see some of the examples and the formats. Even farther down than that, there's tables talking about like what kind of data it is, and they actually just updated it recently for AI and R&D guidance to be included in the metadata as well. So very exciting to see that is still in play and is on the books, and people are still working on it. But over December 24th or 23rd, I want to say, oh, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. So one of the requirements of code.gov is to publish this agency-wide inventory, which is basically just a JSON file with all the repos and their licenses and all that kind of stuff, where it comes from and when it was last updated, etc. So this is what it looks like for having the inventory that goes to code.gov in compliance with the federal open source code policy. Fast forward to this year, last year now, in December 23rd of 2024, the Share IT Act was recently signed into law in the United States. And if you scroll down a little bit, you can see the summary here. It says that custom code that is developed for agency contracts funded by the government, developed by employees, and certain technical components such as architecture and metadata are 1, owned by the agency, 2, stored in no less than 1 public or private repo, and 3, accessible to federal employees under certain procedures. And you can read the whole act itself. There is a link to the full text. This summary gives a pretty good example. It doesn't apply to source code that is classified or developed in national security or by the intelligence community, and CIOs can list exemptions for certain repositories, but those exemptions also need to be tracked and reported. So there is a congressional report that comes out every year that talks about where all this code lives. For folks in this group, I think you can see that this is a very interesting and very exciting development here in the United States. So our team found out about this, and we started prototyping and writing code and saying, if we were going to comply with this, what might it look like? So we developed this GovCode.json repo, and we are looking at the metadata standards in the legend. Code.json was the original federal policy. At the OSPOs for Good symposium, we talked about public code.yaml, which is a standard that's being used in France and Germany. And then we have our own CMS fields that we've added for things that matter to us at our agency. And now we have the Share IT Act. So you just, briefly breeze through this. You can see with the little emojis, like where each of these fields come from and a little bit of a description of what they are and some examples of what might go into that field. So the metadata exists, but that's not super usable. So we decided to create a form, a static form that will take a JSON file of the metadata and build a nice little web form that people can fill out for themselves. So if you wanted to add this code to your repository, you could just fill out this form. And then at the bottom, when you scroll all the way down, there's a button to click submit, and you can save a local copy of the JSON and you can upload it to your repository. This is one of the first steps in helping to inventory for M1624 as well as Share IT. But doing it manually is not our favorite thing, right? We are OSPOs. We want to automate and operationalize as much as we can. So our team built out another tool, an automated code.json generator. And this is a GitHub action that will go to your code.json and edit it, or if you don't have one, it will create one. And we have an example of what that looks like. This is a PR that was recently closed on that form site. It adds things like labor hours and categories and tags and all kinds of interesting bells and whistles that are the types of things that are added both from the federal standards and in the international standards. And then that pull request is sent and the projects can get their updated metadata. That is our approach to maintaining an inventory. And then we have another piece of the puzzle, which I think is going to be a live demo. We have our index generator that can run and generate the index. So if all of your repos have a code.json file in it, you can run a simple Python script and pass in what your agency is, what GitHub orgs you want to track, to what schema and what output. And when you run it, it will check all the repos in an org, tell you whether or not it found a code.json, and then generate an index that we can use to be uploaded to inventory places like code.gov. And our agency is CMS, right? So this is just the stuff that's in our organizations and our sort of subdivision of the Department of Health and Human Services. But this code in this pattern is modular and extensible. So if we wanted to, say, run this at the HHS level, you can imagine that instead of CMS, you say HHS, and then you tell it all of the GitHub orgs that exist inside of that agency, including CMS, and you can generate a larger index file. And that could be used to comply with the Share IT Act. And, this is obviously a prototype. It is, example code. It is very early, but we are happy with the way that it's built at the moment, and we are sharing it with the OSPO community and around the agency to get feedback about the approach and see what people think. We are happy with the results so far and looking forward to hearing from the community. If anyone has any thoughts or feedback.
This is very cool, Remy. I'm definitely going to check this out. Thank you for sharing it with us.
Great. And so to relate it more broadly, some of the folks here in the OSPO call are aware that there are international projects like the Software Heritage Foundation that have initiative to preserve and share the source code of all software They have 4 billion unique source code files and 83 million software projects. And this is the place where folks from countries like Germany and France and the Netherlands are all taking their inventories and also running and adding their projects to this UNESCO cultural heritage project. So we're keeping those metadata standards in mind. The code meta JSON that Software Heritage uses looks a little bit different if you click on that, Sachin. So they use a JSON LD, which is best practices. That's somewhere that we would like to get to, and possibly writing some kind of converter so that we can turn our code.json into a JSON LD file that can easily be used for AI, metadata, federated, Fediverse stuff. Like once you get into JSON LD, there's lots of really cool side effects that can come from having your data in that format. So that's where we're hoping to go in the future, and help bring the federal open source inventory into the world of the global open source public sector inventory of software. And so far, we've got some running code and some ideas. We're going to share them around the agency. We've got some new laws on the books that we're excited to see how the guidance pans out. Those are set to go into effect somewhere in July. So we are a little bit ahead of the curve. We sort of grabbed a hold and just wanted to write code first and then use that to help inform the strategy. We're hopeful that we'll get a chance to discuss this and share it with other agencies so that we can, not have to have every single agency rewriting all this code, which would help us to save a lot of money for the taxpayers and a lot of burden and a lot of time for all the employees and contractors who hopefully won't have to write all this stuff from scratch and waste a bunch of time and money. So saving money, saving time, and meeting the requirements of the law in the United States and participating in the international community. That's the goal. We'll see how it goes. But you are some of the first folks to hear about it. We released it last week on Friday. So this is still fresh, not even a week old that we shipped this stuff.
Yeah, just fantastic work. I can't say that again. This is great. I'm super excited to see how we could leverage this.
I'm a big fan of the work you're doing.
Well, we wouldn't be doing this work without the support and contributions of people here. We were at Open Source Summit North America with your team last year, James, and we talked about repository scaffolder and metadata and how important these templates were. And this is sort of the next phase 1 year later of what we can do with adding some of this metadata and how that will help with our open source program office's inventory efforts. Is anyone else here using a similar strategy in their OSPO or know of other OSPOs that do this kind of put metadata in the repo and keep track of stuff? Or do you have other dashboards or ways that you approach this in a manual or automated way?
We've thought about putting like using custom properties or something like that in our GitHub repos to track that kind of stuff, but we found that it wasn't exactly what we wanted. So we have an internal dashboard that we built that does similar stuff, but I'd like to get out of that because being a service owner is never fun. So when it goes down, I don't like getting paged. So if I can get out of that game, I'm going to do the best I can.
Totally, yeah. And we are starting with a GitHub first implementation because that's where a lot of the source code lives, but to fall in line with the digital public good standards and other, just best practices of not being platform dependent, we're open to other ways to do this in like, plain Git repos or GitLab instances or, other ways that we can pull in because any public or private repository is what the Share IT Act says. So that doesn't necessarily mean a GitHub repo. And I expect that we're going to have a multi-platform approach, but we're just starting with GitHub for now because the tools are there and that's where a lot of the source code lives. And we will see how the rest of that implementation works. So those dashboards you were talking about, if any of that stuff is open source, we'd love to take a look at it for reference or like, grab some time to chat about it if anybody else has ideas or approaches for good ways to approach this.
Yeah, sadly it's all closed source, just because we don't have the time to support it publicly. But it's definitely something we could start talking about, seeing if we can get something rolling on our side.
Of course, yeah, understandable, especially if it's a lot of private repositories.
Yeah, private internal. It's we keep saying we want to do more open source, and then we're like, you know what? What if it wasn't public though? It's like, well, you're missing the point then. Okay, great.
Yep. The one of the things I thought was very interesting was that even the exempted repositories that aren't going to be released open source with public repositories, they need to have a process for being accessed according to the legislation, and there needs to be a list of the projects as well as the metadata associated with them. So like the exemptions have to be in the metadata. So like, why aren't we sharing this publicly? Does it fall under one of these 4 exceptions? And also there are other pieces as well, like, is there a feedback mechanism and the contract ID that's associated with the repository so that it's easy to connect the contract that funded the development and the source code that was a result of that contract. And that level of radical transparency and openness, we're already hearing is a priority of the current administration. So I think this is well aligned. It's one of the places where OSPOs can really move openness and transparency forward in 2025. And that is also something we know that people really appreciate. Our users, folks in the public, taxpayers want to understand how money is being spent and what it's being spent on. And, there's nothing more open than open source, right? It's just, here you go. Here's where it is. You can check out the contract right along with the repo itself. So if we can get that metadata added, I think we'll unlock a ton of value across the board. And I don't want to take up all of the meeting. We appreciate you giving us the opportunity to share with everybody. So I will cede the floor and return it back to our moderator unless anybody has any other questions.
I just have to say that was the smoothest demo / presentation with multiple people, like running, Sasha's running the screen share and Remy. That was amazing. So I'm just impressed by the delivery, if nothing else. It was awesome. Good job, you guys.
Lucky to have the team we do here at the OSPO.
Well, thank you for that. That was super fascinating. I'm sure people will be interested in watching this recording. And so thank you for letting us record it. And also all these links here are wonderful. So thank you for that. We're almost done. We only have reminders left. So if anybody has anything else they want to put on the agenda, now's the time to do it. Okay. We'll just run through these real quick. Heads up, daylight saving time, which is so fun every year. If you're someone who has to run meetings for international folks, it's amazing. It's the best time of the year. Not really. So if you're not in the US, or if you're in our country, that does not change their clocks on March 9th. This meeting's going to be different for you. So just keep an eye on the calendar. Yeah, I know Europe does March 30th. Australia does like April something. So yeah, sorry. Sorry, we have to be the weird ones, but just keep that in mind that this meeting will change for you. And then the second thing is, as Georg mentioned, we have confirmed CHAOSScon for June 26th. It's the day after Open Source Summit North America, which is when they're doing all their co-located events. So you do have to stick around for another day, and we're in the afternoon. But it will be worth your while, I promise. I promise. You do have to register and attend OSSNA, or register anyway. I guess you don't have to attend if you don't want, but you do have to register and pay. So keep that in mind as well. And then the All Things Open have just opened their call for proposals, and that closes on March 28th. So that is another place to submit whatever you're thinking about. I did also get an email that Open Source Summit Europe, OSSEU, has also opened their call for papers, but I don't see that link on here, so you can find that, I'm sure. But that's just another one that's open for you if you have ideas, or if any of this group, I know sometimes people in this group want to collaborate and work on something together, like a panel discussion or a joint talk. So start reaching out to folks if that's on your mind and something you want to do, because those dates are rapidly approaching. I'm going to stop sharing. Any final thoughts, comments, questions, discussion?
You're all lovely people, and I look forward to these meetings every time. So thank you.
Yay. We love you too. Thanks for your patience with my voice today. I appreciate you all. We'll see you 2 weeks from now. Have a good one, everybody. Thanks again. See y'all.